Good afternoon and welcome to Content Chat. I'm your host, Erica Heald, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I recently was part of the marketing writing bootcamp for marketing profs, where I hosted a session on how to scale your personalization of your content using AI by having in place all of those really great foundational content elements that I wrote about for my book. So as a result, I got all sorts of fantastic questions, 14 in all, at the end of my session, wanting to do some deeper dives into a few of the topics. So I thought today it'd be fun to spend some time going through some of those frequently asked questions that I was not able to get to during the live session. And of course, the recap over on ericaheald.com will have the answers to these questions, plus the FAQs from that session. And if you're a Marketing Profs Pro member, you'll be able to go and watch the webinar recap soon. So take a look for that if you're a member. And if you're not a member, oh my goodness, guys, it is the best way to invest in your career and have all sorts of fantastic resources at your fingertips. I've been a pro member for over a decade and cannot recommend it enough. All right, now let's jump in to some of the questions that I got and that I've actually heard a few other times. So one of the ones that really was interesting to me, apparently my friend Shikupo, he's very interested in this as well. He loves taxonomy. And the reason he loves taxonomy is whenever I have a project that involves taxonomy, it usually involves a lot of me sitting here at this desk, sometimes with him on my lap, sometimes with him at my feet, but a lot of times sifting through a lot of content management system, poking around in content management systems, reading through a variety of documents stored in musty old SharePoint servers and box folders, what have you. The thing is that taxonomy, it is not so much just something that lives in your CMS, which certainly your taxonomy is going to be applied in your CMS. It's actually bigger than that. It is how you talk about the things that you talk about across all of your channels. So if you've ever been in a situation where you've had, let's say, you have a project management team and they send you a document that says, hey, from now on, whenever you name a file, here's our file naming convention. And you know how they have a very specific way they want you to do things, using specific words for different kinds of content in those files. That's taxonomy being used. Similarly, when you go into your blog and you go ahead and you pick an overarching category and then you add a few tags, that's your taxonomy being used. And so it's used all of the time, and it's used in multiple places. Whenever you have, let's say, an intake form where you're choosing from a drop down and it has certain things predefined, that's also taxonomy. But the problem is, in so many organizations, taxonomy is something that just sort of happens. Each person has their own swim lane. They have their own pieces of technology that they own. And as a result, you end up with a bunch of different ways of describing the same or similar related content. The reason this matters is as you start trying to automate things, or as you start incorporating AI into your workflows, if you have 3 different ways that you describe the same email newsletter, each one of those systems and every tool that you use is going to interpret any queries that require it to understand what that thing is, what that newsletter is, how it's performed, what its audience is, etc. If there's 3 different ways that it's been used, everyone's going to have different conclusions. They're going to have different data, and you're just not going to be able to actually get what you need from those systems. AI absolutely needs utmost clarity. They need things to be mapped out and documented. So taxonomy, yeah, you do execute it in your CMS, but you execute it everywhere. And that's why my recommendation always is to start with a spreadsheet. And I know I hate saying that. I do not love spreadsheets. I am not an owner or a shareholder in Microsoft or Google or any spreadsheet related company. It's just they simply are such the useful way of being able to start mapping out what all those things are and coming up with that concrete list and having those master sheets that whenever you're populating the drop downs in some sort of a tool that you're using, that you're not having somebody input them from scratch. Instead, in a best case scenario, you are having them link directly to the live column in your spreadsheet, or you're having them get pinged every time that spreadsheet is updated so that they can update their form inputs. But the key is your taxonomy is going to be executed all over the place and used all of the time. So you need to have that place, that single source of truth, that system of record, that is where you contain all of that taxonomy, all of those words that you use to describe your content types, your channels that you use, the topics that you cover. So all of those things, having them completely mapped out, and spending the time to do that, and then getting the buy-in across your organization that these are the right terms that everyone can agree on and use moving forward, and then making sure to have that system of record be pulled in for any project that ever needs to be using any kind of metadata that has to be consistent across systems. So that, of course, leads to one of the other questions that I got about taxonomy. What am I using to upload those taxonomies to AI? Usually, I am just uploading that spreadsheet into AI. Or if that's not the best way to do it, I will export it as a CSV. Whatever kind of file it will support. Worst case scenario, if it only supports PDFs, I will export it to a PDF and upload it for each type of thing, like one for the categories, one for the tags, etc. So that way it's very, very clear. It really doesn't matter what format it is that you put it into the AI tool. It just matters that you get it in there in however you can, based upon how the tool allows you to provide those kinds of inputs. So I thought that is really such the good segue into, one of the other questions, which is, what do you do in situations where this sort of documentation just isn't in place? Like, how do you start those conversations where you say, hey, we are not going to be as successful as we could be if we don't take the time to document our taxonomy and actually make sure that we're being consistent across systems? So how do we make that case, especially if you as the content leader don't have a seat at the executive table? Usually one of the easiest ways of doing that is to go into your systems of record and try to find the overarching campaign results for any one specific campaign using what would be the most obvious keyword for that campaign. And then I want you to go in and do the behind the scenes work that you would normally have to do in order to see all of it. For example, I always use the example of, inevitably, people call an ebook lowercase e dash book, or uppercase e uppercase b book, or all lowercase ebook. There are so many different ways that people will use the word ebook in file names, or in tagging, or in naming a campaign or an element of a campaign. And the problem is that every time there is a variation in those words, then you're not getting the consolidated data back. You'll end up getting 3 different line items, for example, in your Google Analytics. So then you end up in a situation where you're making decisions that you think are informed, data-informed decisions, but in fact, you're only looking at a subset of the data because your taxonomy, or lack thereof, is getting in the way of being able to get the full picture. And that's really scary when you're talking about using AI to help make decisions or to automate elements of the customer experience. So that's how I would approach getting the time and getting the authority to go in there and make this a priority, to actually document your taxonomy and make sure you get everyone on the same page. Otherwise, you're going to be in a situation where you're using AI tools that really aren't going to be able to give you the real insights into your actual data. They're just going to be guessing based upon whatever data set they were trained on by their creators. Now, another one, another fun and interesting question I got was, I'm kind of struggling to get AI to draft human-like quotes from customer interview transcripts and videos. Either it's taking it word for word, or it's working in wildly made up facts. Any tips? And I'm not going to say which model they noted that they're using, because it's not a model that I've worked with a ton. I haven't liked that model because I have personally struggled with getting it to do what I wanted it to do. But I'll say the best way to be able to train the AI is by having a conversation with it. I know it sounds weird, sounds a little creepy, but when you're doing things like this, if you're giving first, you need to give the AI the context of what good looks like for you. And you will give them, let's say, 2 of your top performing case studies and say, these are 2 of our best case studies. And say, I'm writing a case study and I need some help going through these, hours of transcripts with this customer. I need you to find me a really great quote. And then you note in your instructions that it's okay to paraphrase the quote or to tidy it up a little bit to make it sound better, to make it feel more like the quotes that you have in the example case studies, as long as it doesn't embellish on the claims or add in any external verbiage, add in any kind of external facts. And then ask it to ask you any questions it has before it starts looking for quotes. And have it ask you questions, answer those questions one by one, and then ask it to, once it's ready, once it has everything it needs from you, to go ahead and try to generate a quote. Then when it generates that quote, give it feedback. If it's not quite what you're looking for, what about it is off? What about it is weird? What about it doesn't feel compelling? And then you literally tell it that. And then, and this is so important, once you've actually gone through and you've gotten it to get to a place where it's a quote that you love, that you will actually use, ask it how you should prompt it the next time to get that kind of a result in the same situation. So you ask the AI to help you write a prompt that will get the results that you're looking for. That's what's so fascinating and cool, honestly, is that instead of just being frustrated when we don't get what we want from the AI tools that we're using, we have this really great opportunity to turn that frustration around into a moment where we're teaching the AI and then learning from it, because we're saying to it, hey, obviously what I thought were really clear instructions, they weren't clear because what you turned around and gave me isn't what I was looking for. And so having the back and forth with the AI model is exactly how you're going to be able to get to the place that you want to get to, and then be able to replicate it and scale, which is the most important part of all of this. Let's see. Another one of the questions I got is, how do you manage quality control when this newly created scalability is unleashed? Even well-trained generative AI can spit out off-brand or low-quality content. 100% agree with that. And that's why I would never set up an automation that would let AI automatically create content and distribute it. AI is a fantastic helper and it can do so many things, but I do not for a second want it communicating directly with my customers without a human being as a filter. You have to have a human look at something to make sure that it is actually accurate and that it is on brand. One of the things that can really help, though, with the on brand portion is to create a custom GPT that is really well trained on your brand. I personally do that whenever I take on a new client. I have one for myself as well. And for anything that I create, any piece of content I'm creating, I go into my custom brand voice GPT and I ask it to give me a grade of how well the content that I'm sharing with it actually reflects the brand voice and what are some changes it would recommend that I make in order to make it be more on voice, or if there's anything I should add in order to make it feel more on brand. And it's always interesting because sometimes it'll tell you, hey, this is really, great and really on voice, and I wouldn't change this headline. And other times it'll tell you, yeah, it's good, but if you want to take it a little step further and fine tune it, here are some options. So I personally think that that's really the way that you are going to get to that good enough to actually use it. High quality AI generated output is by having, first of all, having the right inputs, making sure that you've trained it with full context on your brand, having that kind of documentation and governance in place before you're even creating any content. And second, having, really good templates in place, or having that solid version for one audience that you're uploading and saying, hey, we need to version it for this other audience. Here's a persona. But it's wrapping things in enough context, just as you would if you were having a human being do the task who wasn't somebody who'd been working at your company for 10 years. So just always thinking through the lens of treating the AI with the same level of instruction and back and forth as you would if you were having a freelancer come in and create whatever that content is. It's magical how quickly it can do some of these tasks, but it still needs to have that human oversight and that human input in order to be useful. One of the other questions I did not get to is, speaking of regulated industries, could a legal guide be a good addition to your custom chat GPT? Oh, heck yeah. And I'm reaching out to somebody I love to talk more about this in a future content chat. But long story short, if you have any kinds of disclosures that have to be appended whenever you use specific kinds of language, upload those disclosures into your GPT. Similarly, if there are any kinds of specific legal guidelines or usage guidelines that you already have in place for content, add those. Anything you can do to give your GPT the right context so that way it is giving you better output is going to be to your benefit. Doesn't mean that you're going to be able to skip legal review or compliance, sorry, but it does mean it will be aware of those elements and that you can reference them. A good example I always give is if you work in financial services, you cannot use the word options unless you're talking about stock options. Almost no legal team will let you get away with that. Plus, you're going to end up having all sorts of horrible, huge disclosure when you even mention options in the first place. So I'm in the habit of never using that word as a result of working for a large financial institution for 10 years. That's something that the GPT might not know, but it's something that you 100% can have in your style guide that you upload, in any kind of legal documentation that you upload. Just having all of those things that are really unique to your business and to your industry and the content that you create is of so much help to make sure that you're getting better results from your AI. Well, since I have this very squirmy dog sitting here on my lap, I'm going to leave it at that and let you know that if you check out the full recap on the blog later this week, you'll also be seeing a bunch of other questions that I was asked and was able to get to around how to really get content governance going. And if you're going to be at Marketing Profs in Boston, I'm going to be talking about all of this stuff during my session. So hope to see you in Boston, and hope to see you next week here for Content Chat. Bye, everybody.